June 1945. Okinawa. The tropical sun beat down on coral-strewn beaches, turning sand into a blinding white glare. The air was heavy with smoke, the distant rattle of artillery rolling across jagged cliffs. U.S. soldiers advanced cautiously, boots sinking into the damp sand, rifles raised, eyes scanning the horizon for hidden snipers. Sweat-streaked faces, hearts pounding with the rhythm of battle. Amid the chaos, a small convoy creaked forward. A makeshift supply truck, covered in camouflage netting, humming a strange, sweet promise. Inside, crates of ice cream, vanilla, chocolate, even strawberry were stacked neatly, frozen by field generators. A young corporal lifted a cone from its box, the cold cutting through the heat, offering a brief, surreal comfort. Japanese soldiers, entrenched above, watched incredulously as U.S. troops laughed, wiped sand from their boots, and savored ice cream between firefights. It was an act they had never anticipated. In the midst of one of the Pacific War's bloodiest campaigns, a frozen treat became a small, defiant assertion of humanity. The question lingered. In a war defined by destruction, could something as simple as ice cream change the rhythm of battle? By mid-1945, the Pacific theater of World War II had stretched across thousands of miles of ocean, coral islands, and volcanic peaks. The U.S. military had been locked in an arduous campaign of island hopping, moving closer to the Japanese home islands with each costly operation. Guadalcanal had been the first major offensive in 1942, a bitter struggle that revealed the ferocity of Japanese resistance and the importance of logistics, morale, and innovation. Iwo Jima and Saipan followed, each battle a brutal testament to the limits of human endurance, with soldiers facing entrenched defenders, booby-trapped terrain, and relentless artillery barrages. Okinawa, however, was different. It was not just a stepping stone to Japan, it was a crucible. Japanese forces, anticipating invasion, had fortified hills, cliffs, and villages with a network of bunkers and hidden artillery positions. Kamikaze attacks threatened ships offshore. The air reeked of salt, smoke, and cordite, a constant reminder that death could arrive from the sky or the earth itself. For U.S. soldiers, daily survival became a balancing act between strategic objectives and sheer endurance. Amid the intensity, maintaining troop morale became a matter of tactical importance. Supply lines stretched across hundreds of miles of ocean, vulnerable to storms, submarine attacks, and logistical bottlenecks. Generals understood that exhausted, malnourished soldiers were ineffective soldiers. Yet delivering comfort to the front lines in this unforgiving environment was a challenge few could imagine overcoming. The idea of normalcy in combat seemed impossible. Field kitchens churned out rations designed for efficiency. C-rations, canned meat, powdered eggs, and instant coffee. Every meal was functional, but functional alone could not sustain the human spirit under the relentless heat and fire of Okinawa. Soldiers, pressed into daily assaults against entrenched Japanese positions, craved reminders of life beyond the battlefield. Small tastes of home, fleeting sensations that could anchor their minds to something other than blood and chaos. It was within this context that U.S. supply officers began experimenting with unconventional solutions. Engineers and quartermasters adapted refrigeration units, often jury-rigged with surplus parts from destroyed vehicles or repurposed shipboard freezers, to preserve perishable items like ice cream. In a war of massive industrial scale, such innovations seemed almost absurd, a surreal juxtaposition against the destruction surrounding them. Yet these innovations were rooted in pragmatism. A soldier invigorated by a cold treat could march farther, fight harder, and endure longer. Morale was more than an abstract concept, it was a tangible weapon. The scale of the U.S. military effort in the Pacific made such undertakings possible but extraordinary. Hundreds of thousands of troops were involved in the Okinawa campaign alone. Each division required thousands of tons of supplies, from ammunition to medical kits, fuel to food. Within that mountain of material, ice cream might have seemed trivial, even frivolous. But for soldiers exposed to relentless heat, dust, and gunfire, it became a rare, almost magical reprieve. A single cone could lift the weight of days of exhaustion, fear, and homesickness, if only for a moment. Meanwhile, Japanese commanders anticipated a more conventional war. They expected U.S. troops to endure the same hardships they did: limited rations, oppressive heat, and exhaustion. They trained their soldiers to rely on discipline, concealment, and sheer willpower. The thought of an opposing army enjoying luxuries at the front lines was inconceivable. In their calculations, U.S. soldiers would be predictable, battered, and vulnerable. Yet the Americans were learning that morale, ingenuity, and small comforts could create unexpected advantages on the battlefield, shaping actions in subtle but significant ways. The stage was set for something unusual. On one of the hottest days in June, as mortars shook the hillsides and machine gun fire cut through the palm trees, a group of soldiers would experience a moment so human, so incongruous, that it would ripple across their ranks. Ice cream, a symbol of home, childhood, and comfort, was about to enter the calculus of battle. Its arrival would not only surprise Japanese forces but also reveal a profound truth. Even amidst the most brutal conflict, humanity finds a way to assert itself. And in that assertion lay the quiet power that would ripple into the next chapter of the campaign, the human angle of survival and defiance against all odds. The Okinawa campaign tested every facet of the U.S. military. Japanese defenses were meticulous, designed to exploit every weakness. Hillsides were riddled with caves and tunnels, hidden artillery dominated open fields, and sniper fire was a constant threat. Soldiers moved cautiously, scanning for sudden movement, listening for the faintest click of a booby trap. Nights offered no reprieve. The air was thick with humidity, punctuated by distant gunfire and the occasional scream carried on the wind. Frontline conditions were relentless. Men endured blistering heat by day and tropical chills by night. Water was rationed and often tainted. Meals were functional but monotonous. Soldiers complained not only about taste but about the psychological toll of consuming the same canned rations day after day. Yet even in these conditions, the human spirit persisted. Letters from home were treasured, photos kept close to hearts, and small acts of camaraderie became lifelines. Shared cigarettes, whispered jokes, or passing a canteen during a lull in battle. Japanese soldiers, entrenched and determined, expected the U.S. troops to mirror the hardships of war. They assumed the Americans would be driven solely by discipline and firepower. What they could not anticipate was the American ability to combine industrial ingenuity with a focus on morale. Behind the lines, supply officers devised systems to deliver not just necessities, but moments of relief: fresh fruit, canned desserts, and yes, ice cream. These innovations were emblematic of a larger strategy: psychological endurance as much as physical stamina. Portable refrigeration units, often salvaged from ships or trucks, became critical. Insulated containers, dry ice, and early field freezers allowed perishable items to survive long treks from supply ships to the front lines. The logistics were staggering. Every cone of ice cream required careful calculation, coordination with transport, and protection from the tropical heat. Yet the effort reflected a deeper understanding among U.S. commanders that morale could tip the scales, even in a battle measured in artillery barrages and body counts. For the soldiers themselves, these small comforts were transformative. A scoop of chocolate or vanilla in the midst of an amphibious assault was not indulgence. It was psychological reinforcement. In letters home, men described the fleeting sweetness with almost religious reverence. For a moment, one private wrote, "You forget the bullets, the mud, the heat. You remember ice cream at the corner store, at home, before all this madness." These were not frivolities. They were lifelines, brief respites that allowed men to endure horrors that would have otherwise crushed their resolve. On the Japanese side, expectations of American suffering were deeply ingrained. Commanders trained their men to exploit enemy fatigue, to strike when morale broke. But when U.S. soldiers advanced with laughter, sharing small comforts among themselves even under fire, it became an unforeseen tactical variable. A man who could savor a treat in the middle of a firefight was, in subtle ways, stronger than a man simply surviving on discipline alone. It was resilience manifested in the smallest details, and it confounded the assumptions of an enemy who had prepared for predictable suffering. The broader context of this morale-focused innovation also reflected the U.S. military's industrial capacity. Unlike any army the world had seen before, American logistics could extend comfort to the front lines in ways previously unimaginable. Supply ships carried not only shells and ammunition, but luxuries. Troops were sustained not only by rations but by the promise of brief joys. This was industrial warfare married to psychological insight, a combination that would shape campaigns across the Pacific. By the time the U.S. soldiers reached the blood-soaked beaches and rocky hills of Okinawa, the stage was set for a remarkable convergence. Human endurance, logistical mastery, and small comforts would collide against the backdrop of one of the most intense battles of the war. Ice cream, simple and unexpected, was poised to become an unlikely instrument of resilience, an emblem of hope and humanity amidst the relentless machinery of death. This moment, trivial at first glance, would reveal a hidden truth about the Pacific War: that survival was not measured solely by firepower, but by the ability to maintain humanity in the most inhumane conditions. It was a lesson that would echo through the experiences of soldiers, the calculations of commanders, and the memories of those who lived to tell the story. The stage was now set to examine the battle from multiple angles: human, tactical, technological, and moral. Each perspective would reveal the layers of strategy, psychology, and innovation that transformed a small, frozen treat into a symbol of endurance. Human angle: morale on the front lines. In the Pacific theater, morale was as critical as ammunition. Soldiers faced heat that blistered skin, relentless artillery fire, and the constant threat of death. Each day was a battle not only against the enemy but against exhaustion, fear, and the erosion of hope. In this environment, even the smallest comforts became lifelines. A scoop of ice cream delivered to the front lines was more than a treat. It was a momentary restoration of normalcy, a reminder of home and the life waiting beyond the battlefield. Soldiers laughed, shared bites, and passed cones to comrades with care. That fleeting sweetness, against the bitter backdrop of war, reinforced bonds, alleviated tension, and fortified the human spirit. The psychological impact was profound. Men who could experience joy even briefly were able to face the next onslaught with renewed resilience. Tactical angle: logistics as a weapon. Delivering ice cream to a war zone was no simple feat. Every scoop required careful planning. From transport ships to insulated containers and dry ice, convoys had to navigate beaches under enemy fire, and supplies needed protection from heat, humidity, and the jarring terrain of Okinawa. Supply officers became tactical innovators, turning comfort into a weapon. By sustaining soldiers' morale, they indirectly influenced combat effectiveness. Exhausted men faltered, but men fortified by brief moments of reprieve could endure longer, move faster, and fight harder. In a battle measured by attrition, logistics became a force multiplier, where a refrigerated crate was as strategically important as a box of grenades. Technological angle: portable refrigeration in combat. The presence of ice cream on the front lines reflected a remarkable technological adaptation. Engineers and quartermasters devised portable refrigeration units, some scavenged from destroyed vehicles, others modified from shipboard freezers. Insulation techniques and dry ice storage allowed perishable items to survive the journey from supply ships to forward positions. This ingenuity, born from necessity, demonstrated the U.S. military's ability to translate industrial power into practical advantage. Technology, even in its simplest forms, became a tool of morale and efficiency. Soldiers could enjoy frozen treats, yes, but they also witnessed firsthand the Army's capacity for innovation. A subtle reassurance that they were supported, prepared, and valued. Leadership angle: commanders recognizing human needs. Commanders understood that morale influenced outcomes as much as strategy. Field officers on Okinawa approved the distribution of ice cream not as indulgence, but as calculated reinforcement. They recognized that fatigue and despair could erode combat readiness faster than enemy fire. By allocating resources, coordinating supply lines, and authorizing small comforts, leaders fostered resilience within their ranks. This leadership philosophy, valuing humanity alongside tactical objectives, created a culture where soldiers could endure unimaginable conditions while retaining their sense of identity and purpose. The ice cream was a tangible expression of that leadership, a reminder that men were not mere instruments of war but human beings with needs, fears, and desires. Enemy angle, Japanese perception and miscalculation. Japanese forces, entrenched and battle-hardened, expected predictable suffering from their adversaries. They anticipated fatigue, hunger, and despair weakening U.S. troops. When Americans laughed and shared frozen desserts amidst gunfire, it defied these expectations. The psychological effect on the enemy was subtle but real. Witnessing opponents maintain morale in extreme conditions challenged assumptions about vulnerability. It introduced uncertainty into Japanese calculations, demonstrating that morale, creativity, and industrial capacity could alter battlefield dynamics in unexpected ways. In essence, ice cream became a minor but symbolic disruption, an element of unpredictability in a meticulously planned defensive system. Moral angle, humanity amidst brutality. In the crucible of war, acts of kindness, indulgence, or levity take on amplified significance. Sharing ice cream on a battlefield was morally and emotionally complex. It was a momentary defiance of war's dehumanization. Soldiers embraced their humanity even as they wielded instruments of death. These small comforts bridged the gap between life and survival, reminding men of their own dignity, desires, and capacity for empathy. The act was unremarkable in peacetime but extraordinary under fire, a testament to human resilience and the capacity to seek sweetness even amidst devastation. Each of these angles, human, tactical, technological, leadership, enemy perception, and moral, intertwined to create a singular phenomenon. Ice cream was more than a treat. It was a convergence of strategy, psychology, ingenuity, and humanity. It set the stage for moments that would define not just individual soldiers' experiences but the broader narrative of the Pacific War. Human angle, bonds forged in sweetness. Beyond individual morale, ice cream fostered camaraderie among soldiers. Shared bites became small rituals, passing cones, teasing each other over flavors, laughing amidst the distant thuds of artillery. These brief moments of levity strengthened trust and solidarity. Men who could find joy together, even fleetingly, were more likely to cover each other, share burdens, and endure prolonged engagements. In a landscape defined by fear and exhaustion, these shared experiences became an invisible shield, sustaining both mind and body. Tactical angle, psychological warfare by surprise. The psychological impact on the battlefield extended beyond morale. Japanese forces, observing American troops smiling and laughing under fire, confronted an unexpected dimension of warfare. They expected stoicism, fatigue, and grim determination, but instead, they saw resilience expressed in joy. While ice cream was not a weapon of destruction, it became a subtle form of psychological advantage. Soldiers who felt supported, cared for, and human were less likely to break under pressure. The enemy, meanwhile, faced the dissonance of confronting opponents whose strength lay not only in firepower but in unbroken spirit. Technological angle, innovation meets necessity. The introduction of ice cream on front lines highlighted the U.S. military's ability to integrate technology with daily life under extreme conditions. Field refrigeration units required constant maintenance, insulation, and precise timing to prevent spoilage. Quartermasters coordinated shipments with the precision of a military operation. Each cone reaching a soldier represented a triumph of engineering, logistics, and foresight. This was more than indulgence. It was evidence that technology could extend the battlefield's human dimension, turning small comforts into tactical advantages. Leadership angle, command philosophy, and care. The decision to provide ice cream revealed a broader leadership philosophy. Effective commanders recognized that human endurance determined combat effectiveness. Generals and field officers understood that supporting soldiers' psychological needs reinforced operational objectives. By approving and facilitating these small comforts, leaders signaled their investment in soldiers' welfare. It was a deliberate choice, one that acknowledged the soldier not only as a fighter, but as a human being whose courage could be sustained by dignity, laughter, and shared sweetness amidst chaos. Enemy angle, the unseen effect on Japanese strategy. For Japanese commanders, the unexpected resilience of U.S. soldiers complicated tactical assumptions. When opposing forces exhibited morale beyond expectations, entrenched defenses became less predictive. Assaults intended to exploit presumed fatigue were less effective. Even minor disruptions, like witnessing laughter and human enjoyment under fire, introduced uncertainty. While ice cream did not alter troop numbers or artillery effectiveness, it subtly shifted the mental landscape of the battlefield, demonstrating that psychological factors could have strategic consequences. Moral angle, humanity in the face of devastation. War is often defined by its capacity to dehumanize, yet small acts of care, like offering ice cream, reaffirmed human dignity. Soldiers were allowed a brief reprieve from violence, a reminder of the life they fought to protect. These moments illuminated the paradox of warfare. Destruction and creation of comfort could coexist, each highlighting the fragility and resilience of human life. In that fleeting indulgence, men retained their identities, their memories of home, and their capacity for joy, a subtle but profound moral victory against the machinery of war. The convergence of these angles paints a holistic picture. Ice cream on the front lines was a multifaceted phenomenon. It was simultaneously human, tactical, technological, leadership-driven, psychologically disruptive to the enemy, and morally significant. Together, they set the stage for a climactic sequence where a simple treat would intersect with one of the Pacific War's most intense moments, altering the experience of battle and revealing the enduring strength of the human spirit. June 23, 1945. The southern ridge of Okinawa smoldered under a relentless sun. U.S. soldiers advanced through waist-high grass, each step uncertain, every shadow a potential threat. Mortars pounded distant cliffs, and the sharp rat-a-tat of machine guns echoed from concealed bunkers. Exhaustion weighed heavily on men, yet they pressed forward, driven by orders, training, and a stubborn will to survive. At a forward supply point, a small truck idled under the shade of coconut palms. Insulated crates clinked as men carefully extracted what, on the surface, seemed absurd: ice cream. Vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, perishable luxuries transported miles from ships offshore, maintained by dry ice and makeshift refrigeration units. Corporals and privates alike gathered around, cones in hand, licking slowly, savoring the cold sweetness that cut through the oppressive heat. The scene was surreal. In the midst of one of the Pacific War's bloodiest campaigns, men paused to experience a moment of joy. Nearby, Japanese snipers and lookouts observed the unusual sight. They had prepared for stoic, battered opponents, but here were Americans laughing, brushing sand from their uniforms, sharing a treat under artillery fire. It was a moment of unexpected defiance, a breach of predictability in the theater of war. For the soldiers, the significance went beyond taste. Ice cream became a tangible anchor to home, to childhood memories, to a life beyond the battlefield. It rejuvenated tired arms and blistered feet, reinvigorating men for the next push forward. Letters later described it with near-reverent tone. A brief oasis amidst the chaos, a symbol of resilience against relentless enemy fire. Meanwhile, commanders monitored the distribution with careful precision. Timing was everything. Crates had to reach the front lines without melting, soldiers had to consume them quickly, and the flow of combat could not be disrupted. Yet the payoff was immediate. Morale lifted noticeably. Soldiers moved with renewed purpose, laughter punctuated by gunfire, camaraderie strengthened in shared indulgence. It was an extraordinary example of tactical psychology in action, a minor logistical feat producing outsized effects on combat effectiveness. The turning point came during a sudden Japanese counterattack. Mortar shells fell closer than expected, and machine guns raked the advancing lines. Soldiers, momentarily fortified by sweetness, responded with coordinated efficiency. They returned fire with precision, held their positions, and assisted comrades with uncharacteristic steadiness. In letters and reports, some would later attribute their focus and endurance to that small reprieve, a reminder that human spirit, however briefly reinforced, could shape outcomes in unexpected ways. The juxtaposition was striking. The battlefield was chaos incarnate. Smoke, blood, fire, and fear dominated every sense. Yet within this maelstrom, men enjoyed ice cream, an act seemingly trivial but charged with strategic consequence. It was a physical manifestation of resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest, most violent moments, human ingenuity and morale could assert themselves. Observers from both sides took note. U.S. officers recorded the event as a small but meaningful victory of morale. Japanese soldiers, unprepared for such psychological fortitude, faced an adversary whose determination was reinforced not solely by training or weapons, but by carefully nurtured humanity. It was a lesson in unpredictability. Sometimes, strength on the battlefield came not from artillery or strategy, but from simple human moments that reaffirmed purpose and resolve. As the day progressed, the ice cream was gone, cones licked clean, crates empty. But the effect lingered. Soldiers pressed onward, navigating jagged terrain, exchanging fire with entrenched defenders, yet buoyed by the brief reprieve they had shared. What had begun as a simple act, delivering a treat to men in the heat of battle, had become a defining moment, an unexpected pivot in the rhythm of the campaign. The ridge of Okinawa had witnessed countless acts of bravery, moments of horror, and displays of ingenuity. Yet, on this day, it had also witnessed an extraordinary affirmation of humanity. Ice cream, in its simplicity, had intersected with violence to reveal a hidden truth. Even amidst destruction, the human spirit could find ways to endure, to resist, and to surprise friend and foe alike. This scene set the stage for a second, even more intense phase of the campaign, where the effects of morale, ingenuity, and psychological advantage would ripple further into the battle, influencing decisions, engagements, and the perceptions of both soldiers and commanders. The following morning, June 24, 1945, dawned over Okinawa with an eerie calm. Mist clung to the hillsides, mingling with smoke from the previous day's bombardments. Soldiers moved cautiously, the taste of yesterday's ice cream still lingering as a faint, almost surreal memory. Yet the battlefield offered no respite. Japanese forces launched a coordinated counterattack, artillery raining down from concealed positions, and machine guns slicing through the thick grass and scrub. U.S. soldiers responded with disciplined efficiency, their nerves steadied by more than training alone. The shared moments of levity, the laughter amidst chaos, the fleeting pleasure of ice cream cones, it had fortified them. In the chaos, privates and corporals moved with synchronized determination, tending to wounded comrades, covering advances, and holding lines that might have faltered under exhaustion and fear. What seemed trivial, a frozen treat, had become a catalyst subtly reinforcing resilience across entire units. Commanders observed with quiet satisfaction. They had recognized the unconventional value of morale in extreme combat. While artillery and naval support remained critical, the human dimension of warfare, mental stamina, camaraderie, and fleeting comfort proved equally indispensable. Even small victories in maintaining soldier spirits translated directly into tactical effectiveness. Ice cream had become a symbol, tangible proof that ingenuity and humanity could coexist with strategy and firepower. Japanese defenders, in turn, struggled to interpret this phenomenon. They had expected demoralized, predictable adversaries, exhausted by relentless heat and attrition. Instead, they faced men who moved with unexpected steadiness, who communicated effectively, and who maintained a cohesion that defied their expectations. Observers recorded that these small psychological factors influenced enemy perception, disrupting plans and sowing uncertainty. In some instances, attacks faltered because defenders misjudged the American stamina and resolve, assuming fatigue would slow their advance. In one vivid incident, a squad advancing under fire paused not from fear, but to share a final scoop among themselves before pressing onward. The momentary sweetness provided clarity amidst chaos, allowing soldiers to coordinate movement, distribute ammunition, and maintain situational awareness. It was a microcosm of the battle's larger truth. Moments of humanity could coexist with the harsh realities of war, enhancing effectiveness rather than undermining it. By midday, the ridge had stabilized. Lines held, casualties retreated, and the forward push resumed with renewed intensity. Soldiers carried memories of small comforts like armor, protecting their minds against the relentless brutality surrounding them. These psychological advantages were subtle yet decisive. They allowed units to function at peak capacity despite the extraordinary physical and emotional demands of combat. The ripple effect extended beyond individual soldiers. Units buoyed by morale were able to exploit enemy weaknesses, respond to ambushes, and maintain communication under pressure. Leadership recognized the tactical significance. Sustaining soldiers' mental and emotional resilience directly contributed to operational success. In a battle defined by attrition and firepower, psychological endurance had emerged as a crucial force multiplier. Even in letters and reports filed after the campaign, soldiers recounted the surreal juxtaposition of sweetness and violence. The memory of ice cream under fire became emblematic of their broader experience. That survival and humanity were intertwined, that moments of levity could coexist with acts of extreme courage. For many, these experiences would define the narrative of Okinawa not just as a test of arms, but as a testament to ingenuity, camaraderie, and the resilience of the human spirit. As the sun set over the battered ridges, the sound of distant artillery softened into the night. Soldiers, fatigued yet resolute, knew that the battle would continue tomorrow. But the moment of ice cream, brief, human, and unexpectedly strategic, had left an indelible mark. It was a turning point not in the maps or numbers alone, but in the lived experience of men who faced death daily yet retained the capacity for joy, connection, and endurance. The battlefield had proven something extraordinary, that even in the crucible of war, ingenuity, care, and small comforts could shift the rhythm of combat. Ice cream, simple and ephemeral, had revealed a truth that artillery and tactics could not. Humanity, nurtured amidst chaos, was itself a weapon. This realization set the stage for the aftermath, where the consequences of morale, innovation, and unexpected human resilience would ripple across units, commanders' reports, and the memory of the campaign itself. The Okinawa campaign drew to a tense pause as the first waves of reinforcements settled into the battered lines. Casualties were heavy, and the landscape bore the scars of relentless combat. Shattered trees, craters, burned-out bunkers. Yet amidst the devastation, small victories persisted, subtle and human, woven into the fabric of survival. Soldiers who had tasted ice cream under fire carried with them a renewed sense of endurance. That moment of levity, brief as it was, became a mental anchor, reminding men that life and humanity persisted even in the shadow of relentless violence. Reports from field officers noted the unexpected benefits of morale initiatives. Units who had participated in small comforts, including ice cream distribution, demonstrated steadier coordination, improved communication, and less susceptibility to fatigue-induced errors. Privates and corporals alike credited these moments with helping them maintain focus during critical engagements. Letters home described the scene in vivid detail. "We laughed in the middle of hell," one soldier wrote. "A scoop of vanilla never tasted so much like hope." Such accounts, often anecdotal, were corroborated by officers' observations. Commanders began to recognize that sustaining morale was not merely indulgence. It was operational necessity. Japanese forces, meanwhile, continued to confront an adversary whose psychological resilience defied expectation. They had anticipated battered, fatigued soldiers, yet encountered units operating with cohesion, clear-headedness, and even moments of levity. The surprise was more than cultural, it had tactical implications. Morale, when deliberately nurtured, could stabilize frontline operations, reduce errors, and subtly influence enemy calculations. Ice cream, a symbol of this approach, had inadvertently become a psychological wedge in the battle, challenging assumptions about predictability and vulnerability. The supply chain adjustments required to sustain such initiatives revealed the U.S. military's industrial capacity in stark relief. Refrigeration units, insulated containers, and carefully timed deliveries were deployed with precision, demonstrating that logistical innovation could extend beyond ammunition and rations to the human dimension of war. In retrospect, these efforts were emblematic of a broader philosophy. a recognition that soldiers were not merely instruments of combat but human beings whose endurance depended on mind as much as body. Among the men, camaraderie strengthened in ways that formal reports could not fully capture. Sharing ice cream fostered informal hierarchies of care and trust. Corporals distributed cones to privates. Medics shared a scoop before tending to the wounded, and squads exchanged flavors with laughter punctuating the tension of battle. These rituals, though ephemeral, reinforced bonds that would later become lifelines during ambushes, night operations, and moments of extreme duress. Morale initiatives, once dismissed as trivial, proved integral to sustaining effective fighting units over extended periods of combat. The ripple effects extended beyond immediate tactical advantages. Soldiers returned from the front lines carrying stories of small comforts into the broader military narrative. Ice cream became a touchstone, a symbol of ingenuity and care, referenced in unit histories and post-war memoirs. For historians, it illustrates a rare convergence of human resilience, logistical mastery, and psychological strategy. A reminder that war is fought not only with weapons and strategy, but with attention to the human experience of those on the front lines. As Okinawa's hills settled into the quiet of evening, the survivors carried forward lessons that would shape future operations. Comfort and morale were no longer peripheral concerns. They had proven their influence on endurance, cohesion, and tactical performance. The simple act of delivering ice cream under fire had demonstrated a profound truth. In war, attention to humanity could yield measurable advantages, transforming moments of indulgence into strategic leverage. As the Okinawa campaign drew deeper into July 1945, the human and tactical consequences of small comforts became increasingly evident. Soldiers who had experienced brief reprieves, whether ice cream or other morale initiatives, reported a heightened capacity to endure the relentless pace of combat. Units maintained cohesion under extreme duress, medics navigated forward positions with steadiness, and platoons advanced under fire with a discipline sharpened by moments of restored morale. What had begun as a seemingly trivial indulgence had evolved into a measurable enhancement of combat effectiveness. Command reports reinforced these observations. Officers documented not only improved operational efficiency but also reduced instances of heat exhaustion, disorientation, and minor morale-related lapses. Soldiers who could anticipate small comforts, whether a hot meal, a letter from home, or a cone of ice cream, demonstrated subtle but critical advantages in responsiveness and focus. In an environment where the margin between survival and casualty was often measured in seconds, such factors could determine the outcome of localized engagements and, cumulatively, influence larger operational trajectories. Japanese defenders, meanwhile, faced a psychological challenge they had not foreseen. The predictability of U.S. fatigue had been a tactical assumption built into their defensive planning. The unexpected maintenance of morale on the American side disrupted these calculations. While ice cream did not provide a direct increase in firepower, it symbolized a broader capability: the ability to sustain men psychologically, ensuring that exhaustion and despair did not create exploitable weaknesses. Observers noted a subtle but consistent pattern. U.S. units appeared steadier, less hesitant, and more cohesive under pressure. Beyond the immediate battlefield, the campaign left an enduring imprint on military doctrine. The Pacific Theater demonstrated that human factors, morale, comfort, and psychological reinforcement, were integral components of operational planning. Subsequent military manuals, post-war analyses, and veteran memoirs highlighted the importance of sustaining soldiers' mental and emotional endurance, often citing the Okinawa experiences as formative examples. Ice cream, once a novelty, became a case study in the strategic utility of morale initiatives. For the soldiers themselves, the memory of small comforts lingered long after the cannons fell silent. Letters sent home carried the surreal juxtaposition of laughter and violence. "We fought through fire and rain," one private wrote, "and yet we ate ice cream in the middle of it. Never have I felt both the sweetness of life and the bitterness of war so closely together." Such recollections illustrate the profound emotional resonance these small interventions held. They were not mere distractions. They were affirmations of identity, humanity, and connection amidst the machinery of war. Even decades later, Historians examining the Okinawa campaign recognize the significance of these psychological nuances. The battle, often quantified in casualties, artillery counts, and territorial gains, also contained unmeasured dimensions. The resilience of spirit, the ability to maintain cohesion under duress, and the strategic benefits of human-centered logistics. Ice cream, in this context, serves as a tangible symbol of ingenuity intersecting with compassion, demonstrating that even the smallest comforts could shape outcomes in extraordinary circumstances. Ultimately, the aftermath of Okinawa illuminated a critical lesson. Warfare is not only about firepower, strategy, or terrain. It is also about sustaining the human element, the minds, hearts, and spirits of those who fight. By recognizing and addressing these factors, commanders could enhance operational effectiveness in ways that traditional metrics alone could not capture. The legacy of ice cream on the front lines is more than anecdotal. It is emblematic of a philosophy that marries logistical innovation with human care, yielding consequences that ripple far beyond a single battlefield. As the Pacific War edged toward its final chapters, these lessons carried forward. Soldiers and commanders alike understood that even amidst destruction, maintaining humanity was both possible and strategically advantageous. The campaign's scars were visible in the landscape, but the imprints of morale, ingenuity, and small comforts endured within the soldiers themselves. War is often measured in numbers, troop movements, artillery counts, casualties. Yet, as the Pacific Islands revealed, its essence is also measured in human endurance, resilience, and the quiet acts that sustain life amidst destruction. Ice cream on the front lines of Okinawa was more than a fleeting indulgence. It was a testament to the human spirit asserting itself against the machinery of war. In a landscape scarred by artillery craters, burned-out bunkers, and the echo of relentless gunfire, soldiers found a moment of sweetness. That simple act, a cone shared between comrades, laughter amidst chaos, revealed a profound truth. Even in the most brutal conditions, humanity persists. It strengthened morale, reinforced cohesion, and provided clarity under stress, proving that psychological fortitude could shape the flow of battle as much as strategy or firepower. The lessons of Okinawa endure beyond the battlefield. They remind us that human needs, comfort, camaraderie, and the reassurance of care, are inseparable from operational effectiveness. Leaders who recognized this, engineers who made ice cream portable, and soldiers who embraced it collectively demonstrated that empathy and ingenuity are as vital to success as courage and discipline. Ultimately, this story is a quiet celebration of resilience. Amid devastation, small comforts became instruments of defiance, affirmation, and survival. Ice cream, a trivial pleasure in peacetime, became a beacon of hope, a tangible symbol that even in war, life's sweetness can endure. It is a reminder that history is shaped not only by battles won or lost, but by the ways humans sustain one another, maintain dignity, and preserve a sense of normalcy under the most extraordinary pressures. Okinawa, and the men who fought there, teach us that the human spirit, when nurtured even in the smallest ways, can persist against overwhelming odds. And sometimes, the most unexpected tools, a cone of ice cream, a shared laugh, can leave a mark as enduring as the fiercest artillery strike.